Hey everyone, welcome back to TLC Uncovered, the only channel that goes beyond the headlines and brings you the stories the network never wanted you to see. Today, we're digging into the biggest twist in the Sister Wives saga yet, a story that began in whispers, turned into paperwork, and ended with gasps inside the courtroom. The title says it all: Janelle floors Kody with new receipts, and Meri's final statement hits hard. But trust me, it's even deeper than it sounds. Look at this image. It's from the courthouse hallway, late afternoon, harsh fluorescent light cutting through the glass. You can see Janelle standing beside her lawyer, holding a folder, nothing dramatic, just papers. But those papers? They would change everything. Because for years, Kody had controlled the story. The finances, the narrative, even the version of the truth the audience was allowed to see. But this time, Janelle came prepared. According to insiders, the moment began quietly. The judge had asked for additional evidence, proof of financial misrepresentation within the family's joint accounts. Janelle's lawyer, calm but deliberate, stood up and said, "Your Honor, we have new documentation, direct from the bank." And that's when the air shifted. You could see Kody's confidence falter, just slightly. Robyn turned toward him, whispering something under her breath. The attorney at their table leaned forward, his expression tightening. Because those receipts weren't just numbers. They were a map, a trail of withdrawals, transfers, and handwritten memos. Each one linking back to a single signature. Kody's. But the real sting wasn't just about the money. It was about the lies that came with it. For years, the family had believed certain business accounts were frozen, unavailable due to taxes, logistics, or TLC's production contracts. Janelle, trusting as ever, accepted it. Until one day, a former accountant sent her a message that simply read, "You might want to look at who's been signing the checks." That message led her here. To this moment. And as those documents hit the judge's bench, you could almost feel the walls closing in around Kody. The receipts didn't just expose the transactions. They exposed intent. The courtroom went still. Reporters scribbled in silence. Kody folded his arms, leaned back, and smiled, that familiar, defensive grin we've all seen before, but his eyes told a different story. He wasn't smiling because he was confident. He was smiling because he knew he'd been caught. But here's the thing. This wasn't just Janelle's moment. Because waiting in the hallway, watching it unfold from a distance, was someone who had been silent for too long. Meri. And according to sources who were there that day, what she said next, when she finally took the stand, would take that quiet courtroom and turn it into the most unforgettable moment in the entire Sister Wives timeline. But before we step into that scene, remember this: Janelle's receipts may have proven the deception, but Meri's statement? It would prove the damage. Next, we'll go inside that courtroom. You'll hear the words that silenced Kody, stunned Robyn, and made the entire gallery stop breathing for a full 10 seconds. This is the part of the story TLC never aired, because what happened next wasn't entertainment. It was truth. The courtroom had already shifted once, when Janelle's receipts landed on that desk. But when Meri walked through the double doors, everything changed again. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't storm in or look for attention. She simply entered, calm and deliberate, wearing a muted blue suit, her hair tied back neatly, and a folder pressed against her chest. Even Kody looked up. For a split second, the confidence on his face flickered. Because Meri wasn't supposed to be there. Not officially. Not after everything. The bailiff announced, "Next witness, Meri Brown." You could feel the tension ripple through the courtroom. Even Janelle turned, watching closely. Robyn shifted in her seat, clutching a tissue she didn't actually use. When Meri took the stand, the room fell completely silent. Her lawyer, a quiet woman with sharp eyes, began gently. "Ms. Brown, could you please tell the court your relationship to the defendant?" Meri took a breath. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "He was my husband," she said. Then, after a pause, "and the father of a family I thought I knew." No one moved. The lawyer nodded. "Ms. Brown, are you aware of the financial discrepancies outlined in these documents?" She gestured toward Janelle's stack of evidence. "Yes," Meri said. "I am. I saw the transfers. I saw the dates. And I recognized the handwriting." "Whose handwriting?" Kody's. You could hear the faint scratch of a pen somewhere in the gallery. Even the judge looked up. Meri continued, her tone soft but cutting. He used to tell us that money was gone. That the family fund had been depleted. That we had to tighten our belts. And we believed him. The lawyer asked, why? Meri looked toward Kody. Not with anger, just exhaustion. Because we wanted to. Because it was easier to believe that we were struggling together than to admit that some of us were struggling alone. You could see Kody's jaw tighten. Robyn reached for his arm, but he pulled slightly away. Meri went on. I wasn't part of the lawsuit. I didn't plan to testify. But when I saw what Janelle found, I realized I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Silence protects the wrong people. The lawyer handed her a document. Ms. Brown, could you identify this? Meri took a long look. That's a check, she said, written to a private company under Robyn's name. From the family account. It's dated the same week I was told we couldn't afford to pay our property tax. There was a murmur from the gallery. The judge tapped his gavel once, quiet, controlled, but it was too late. The shock had already settled in. Meri didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just told the truth, line by line. Every word was like a small piece of glass, sharp and deliberate. When the lawyer asked, Ms. Brown, why are you speaking now? Meri didn't hesitate. Because I've spent years watching people I love get rewritten into someone else's story, she said. And I'm done being edited out. For a moment, even the court reporter stopped typing. Meri looked down, then back up again. Her next words would become the most quoted line of the entire trial transcript. I'm not here for revenge, she said. I'm here for truth. And sometimes, truth looks like receipts. A few people in the gallery exhaled audibly. The sound of chairs creaking, people shifting, the moment breaking, but only slightly. Kody sat frozen. The smirk was gone. His fingers tapped the table once, twice. Then stopped. The lawyer said quietly, no further questions. As Meri stepped down, she didn't look back. She walked past Kody's table, her heels clicking softly on the tile floor. The kind of sound that lingers after someone leaves, not because it's loud, but because it's final. And just before she reached the exit, Janelle reached out and placed her hand over Meri's. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. Just one quiet moment of solidarity between two women who had finally decided to stop believing the same lie. Outside, cameras waited. But neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Because inside that courtroom, the truth had already spoken for them. Next, we'll uncover what happened after Meri's testimony, the behind-the-scenes chaos, the defense's desperate counterattack, and the private conversation between Kody and his lawyer that insiders say changed everything. The moment Meri stepped out of the courtroom, the silence she left behind felt heavier than any outburst could have. Even the defense table, once a fortress of confidence, looked rattled. Kody sat motionless, eyes fixed on the pile of papers in front of him. His lawyer, a polished man in a dark gray suit named Silas Croft, leaned in close and whispered something that no microphone could catch. But those sitting nearby said it looked like the first time Kody didn't answer back. Robyn sat stiff, her fingers trembling slightly as she folded a tissue over and over in her hands. Every camera in the room had caught it, small, nervous movements from the woman who'd once been the calm center of his storm. Croft cleared his throat and rose from his chair. Your Honor, he began, we object to the inclusion of unverified documents. The authenticity of these checks has not been, the judge interrupted, voice even but firm. Counselor, the documents have already been authenticated by the issuing bank. You'll have your opportunity to cross-examine. Croft hesitated. You could almost see the strategy shifting in real time. His tone softened. Very well. We'll reserve our right to respond. But everyone in that room knew what had just happened. The receipts weren't just paperwork, they were proof. When court recessed for lunch, the atmosphere outside the building was electric. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, phones live streaming to thousands of viewers waiting for updates. Comment sections filled instantly. Janelle came with the receipts. Meri finally spoke. Kody's done. Inside, behind closed doors, the defense's conference room was chaos. According to an insider who was present that afternoon, Kody slammed a folder onto the table so hard that papers scattered to the floor. "She's lying," he said. "They're all lying. I built everything we have." Croft kept his composure. "That's not how the jury's seeing it, Kody. You can't fight evidence with emotion." "I can fight it with truth," Kody shot back. But even he didn't sound convinced. Robyn tried to calm him, her voice breaking slightly. "We just have to explain. They'll understand that we were protecting what's ours." Croft looked at her carefully. "That's the problem," he said. "You keep saying ours. The court sees theirs." That line hit like a gavel. By the time they returned to the courtroom, the tension was visible. Janelle and her lawyer were composed, ready. Meri wasn't in the room anymore, but her words still lingered like smoke. Croft began his cross-examination. He paced slowly, pausing in front of Janelle's table. "Mrs. Brown," he said, voice measured, "you've presented these receipts as proof of wrongdoing. But isn't it true that you were also part of the family business?" Janelle didn't flinch. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly why I know what should and shouldn't be in those books." Croft smiled tightly. "So you handled finances too?" "Shared finances," she corrected. "Until we realized they weren't being shared anymore." The courtroom reacted with a low murmur. Even the judge tilted slightly forward. Croft pressed on, but every question felt smaller, every objection thinner. The narrative was slipping away from him, and he knew it. By mid-afternoon, after a long pause between testimonies, Croft made his final attempt to regain control. He presented a briefcase of new records, claiming they would clarify the transactions in question. But when the judge asked for authentication, Croft hesitated. The documents hadn't been certified. They were photocopies. The judge frowned. "Counselor, I won't allow speculation. Bring me verified records or move on." Kody leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in the entire proceeding, he looked defeated. Janelle, meanwhile, sat quietly, her eyes steady, her hands folded on the table. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. But the corners of her mouth twitched ever so slightly, as if the weight she'd carried for years had just shifted off her shoulders. When the judge called recess for the day, the bailiff's voice echoed through the courtroom, "All rise." Everyone stood. Kody didn't move. Outside, as the media swarmed for statements, Janelle stepped up to the microphones. Her words were simple. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone," she said. "I came here to stop pretending." And that was it. No drama, no insults, just truth, plain and unshakable. But even as the crowd applauded her honesty, something else was brewing behind the scenes. A new witness had requested to testify, someone unexpected, someone close to the situation with inside knowledge of those accounts. The judge granted it. The next morning, that witness would take the stand. And according to our insiders, their testimony would expose the final secret that Kody and Robyn fought hardest to keep. The next morning, the courthouse parking lot was already packed before sunrise. News vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes pointed toward a gray sky that seemed to mirror the tension inside. Everyone had the same question: who was the mystery witness? Rumors spread fast. Some said it was a former TLC staffer. Others whispered it might be one of the older Brown children. But when the courtroom doors opened and the bailiff called the next name, no one was prepared for who stepped through. It was an accountant, a quiet woman in her 40s named Diane Keller, who had worked for the family business, Family Traditions LLC, for over 6 years. She wasn't a cast member, not a relative, not someone fans would recognize. But for the people inside that room, she might as well have been the key to the entire puzzle. Janelle's lawyer stood tall. "Ms. Keller, thank you for being here. Could you tell the court your relationship to the Brown family's financial affairs?" Diane nodded slightly. "I was hired to manage and file quarterly reports for Family Traditions LLC, the account shared between Kody Brown, his wives, and related business ventures." Her tone was calm, professional, no theatrics. But as she spoke, every head in the courtroom tilted forward, hanging on her words. "Ms. Keller," the lawyer continued, "are you aware of discrepancies between what was reported to the other family members and what was actually filed?" Diane looked down, then back up. "Yes," she said. There were significant discrepancies. You could feel the shift again, the kind of silence that only happens when everyone knows something explosive is coming. The lawyer handed her a binder. Could you identify these records? Yes, Diane said. These are copies of the official ledgers for Family Traditions LLC and the separate entity K&R Holdings. The audience stirred at the name. It was the same company mentioned in previous testimony, the one used to funnel funds. Ms. Keller, the lawyer asked, what connection did K&R Holdings have to the Browns? Diane hesitated, then answered carefully. On paper, it was owned by Kody Brown and Robyn Brown. But transactions from Family Traditions LLC were routinely moved into it. Those funds were used to pay personal expenses, mortgage payments, jewelry purchases, luxury travel. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge called for order, but it was impossible to contain. The lawyer pressed forward. And were the other family members aware of these transfers? Diane shook her head. No. The memos attached to those transactions described them as business reimbursements. But when I reviewed the receipts, they didn't match. Some were from boutique clothing stores. Others from home design firms. Janelle's eyes glistened as she listened, not with surprise, but with a quiet confirmation that she'd been right all along. Kody leaned forward, his face red. That's out of context, he muttered loudly. She doesn't understand family operations. The judge shot him a look. Mr. Brown, you will remain silent until it's your turn to speak. Kody sat back, lips pressed tight. The lawyer continued. Ms. Keller, do these records indicate who authorized those transfers? Yes, she said. Each one was signed by Kody Brown. The sound of the words was like the slam of a vault door closing. And who verified them? Robyn Brown. The defense table froze. Croft tried to interject. Your Honor, we question the authenticity of this witness's claims, the judge cut him off. These are verified records, Counselor. Continue. The lawyer nodded. Ms. Keller, one final question. Why did you leave your position with the Browns? Diane exhaled slowly. Because I was asked to stop keeping detailed logs. When I refused, my contract was terminated. A gasp rippled across the courtroom. Even reporters stopped typing. At that moment, Meri, sitting quietly in the back row, lowered her gaze. She'd heard enough. The truth was now undeniable. It wasn't just bad accounting. It was betrayal. As Diane stepped down, the judge called for a short recess. The room erupted in whispers. One reporter turned to another and whispered, "This just became criminal." And they were right. What started as a civil trial about financial mismanagement was now inching towards something far more serious, something that could change everything for Kody and Robyn. Back at the defense table, Croft leaned in close to Kody. If we don't pivot now, he said quietly, you're done. Kody's jaw tightened. Then we pivot. But no one could have predicted what kind of pivot he was about to attempt, one that would drag the case, the family, and even the public perception of everything they'd built straight into chaos. Because when cornered, Kody Brown wouldn't apologize. He'd attack. And that's exactly what he did next. By the time court reconvened after recess, the energy in the room had completely changed. The calm professionalism that had carried the first few days of testimony was gone. You could feel the tension, thick in the air, like a storm about to break. Kody walked back to his seat beside Croft with a different posture, chest forward, chin high, the same performative confidence that had once made him the face of a show about unity. But this time, it looked forced. Calculated. Croft stood and adjusted his tie before addressing the judge. Your Honor, the defense would like to recall Mr. Brown to the stand to clarify several misleading statements presented earlier. The judge nodded. Proceed. Kody took the stand, his voice calm at first, almost rehearsed. People think they know our family, he began. But what they see on TV isn't the full story. There's editing, there's context, and there's a lot the audience never gets to understand. It was a familiar tactic, redirect, reframe, deflect. He'd used it for years. Croft leaned in, steering him. Mr. Brown, these financial documents, some might say they look incriminating. Could you explain why these transfers took place? Kody smiled tightly. Absolutely. I moved money between accounts because I was managing family investments. Real estate, future business opportunities, things meant to protect everyone long-term. From the plaintiff's table, Janelle's lawyer stood and objected immediately. Your Honor, none of these transactions were disclosed to the other members of the family, as required by their partnership agreement. The judge gestured for calm. Mr. Brown, please answer directly. Were these accounts shared? Kody hesitated for half a second too long. They were temporarily private. For administrative reasons. That pause spoke louder than the words. The lawyer moved in. Administrative reasons? Or personal ones, Mr. Brown? Kody's jaw flexed. I didn't steal anything. Every dollar I used went toward supporting the family. And if some people weren't contributing, it's not fair for them to demand equal access. The gallery erupted again, a mix of gasps, whispers, and scribbling reporters. Janelle's lawyer stepped forward. Are you referring to Janelle Brown? To Meri Brown? Kody's voice rose. I'm referring to anyone who stopped believing in this family while still expecting to live off it. The judge's gavel hit hard. Mr. Brown, control yourself. But it was too late. The mask had cracked. In that moment, Kody wasn't the charismatic patriarch anymore, he was the man behind the curtain, defensive and cornered. Croft tried to redirect. Let's talk about intentions, Mr. Brown. Did you ever intend to harm or defraud any member of your family? Kody's tone softened again. No. I just wanted to build something lasting. I wanted to take care of Robyn, of our younger children. The others, they walked away. A subtle gasp came from the back of the room, Meri. Her eyes locked on him, steady and unflinching. The lawyer turned toward the judge. Your Honor, we'll need to recall Ms. Brown to respond to that statement. The judge agreed. Noted. You'll have that opportunity. But Kody wasn't finished. He leaned toward the microphone and said, people love to act like I'm the villain here. But none of this would have happened if they'd just trusted me. I carried this family for decades. They don't know what it's like to be under that kind of pressure. Then, under his breath, but loud enough for every reporter in the front row to catch, he muttered, they wouldn't survive a day without me. It was the line that made headlines before the session even ended. When court adjourned, Janelle walked out the side exit, head high, ignoring the cameras. But Meri stayed behind for a moment. She walked up to Janelle's lawyer and said quietly, he thinks we needed him. Maybe it's time we show him we never did. And that's exactly what she did next. The following morning, Meri submitted a written statement, one that the judge would allow to be read aloud in full. It wasn't about money, or contracts, or accounts. It was about power. Emotional, psychological, financial. And once it was read into record, it would become the moment that truly ended Kody's control, not just over the courtroom, but over the entire narrative. When court resumed the following morning, the crowd that filled the benches was different. It wasn't just reporters now, it was fans, locals, people who had watched the family for over a decade and wanted to see what truth looked like when there were no cameras to frame it. Janelle sat calm and ready. Kody avoided eye contact. Robyn clung to her phone, scrolling, pretending not to notice the whispering. Then Meri walked in holding a single white envelope. No folder, no lawyer by her side, just that envelope. She handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The judge nodded and said, this will be entered into record as Exhibit 64B. Ms. Brown has requested her written statement be read aloud to the court. The courtroom fell silent. The clerk began to read. For years, my story was edited before I ever told it. I learned to speak softly, to keep peace, to let others take the narrative because that was easier than fighting to be understood. I told myself that obedience was strength, that silence was grace. But I see now, silence only protects the ones who benefit from it. The judge's voice was low, steady, but each word seemed to hit harder than the last. I watched people I love struggle to be believed. I watched the truth be twisted into entertainment. And when I tried to speak, I was told to be patient, to be loyal, to wait my turn. My turn never came. So I'm taking it now. Robyn looked down. Kody's jaw was tight. The receipts Janelle brought forward are not about greed. They are about trust. We built a life together, or at least we thought we did. But you can't build a home on invisible ground. Every check signed in secret, every lie told to keep control, that wasn't love. That was fear disguised as leadership. A woman in the gallery wiped away tears. The reporter beside her lowered her pen. You once said we wouldn't survive without you. Maybe you were right for a while. But survival isn't living, and control isn't love. I don't need your permission to exist outside your story anymore. The courtroom was dead quiet. Even Croft, the defense attorney, sat motionless. This is not vengeance. It's closure. I am no longer the character you wrote for me. I am the author of my own ending. And for the record, I forgive you, but I don't trust you. The clerk's voice cracked slightly on the last line. Then he looked up, waiting for the judge's signal. The judge nodded slowly. Statement entered into record. Meri sat still, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't crying. She looked lighter, like someone who'd finally stopped holding her breath. Kody turned toward her. You really think this fixes anything? He muttered. Meri didn't flinch. No, she said softly. But it stops the bleeding. For a long time, no one moved. Reporters didn't rush out. Cameras didn't flash. It was one of those rare courtroom moments that didn't feel like spectacle, it felt like history. As she left the courtroom, someone called her name. She didn't turn around. Later, outside, a journalist shouted the question everyone wanted answered. Meri, do you feel vindicated? She paused for just a second, her voice steady but quiet. No, she said. I feel free. Inside the courthouse, Kody sat alone at the defense table while Robyn spoke to Croft in a hushed panic. For the first time in his life, Kody Brown looked small, like a man realizing that the story he thought he controlled had already moved on without him. But the day wasn't over. Because as the judge prepared to adjourn, Janelle's lawyer stood once more and said, Your Honor, in light of Ms. Brown's statement, we have one more piece of evidence, audio confirmation. The courtroom stirred. Audio confirmation. The kind that couldn't be denied, edited, or reinterpreted. And according to insiders, it was the moment that would finally end Kody's defense for good, the moment the words audio confirmation echoed through the courtroom, a hum of anticipation rolled through the crowd. Reporters leaned forward. Kody's eyes flicked toward his lawyer, and for the first time since the trial began, he looked genuinely unsure. The judge adjusted his glasses. Proceed. Janelle's attorney, composed but sharp, stepped to the center of the room. In her hand was a small digital recorder and a printed transcript. She spoke clearly, letting the suspense breathe. Your Honor, this recording was submitted by a former accountant, Ms. Keller. It was made during a routine business meeting between Kody Brown and his co-manager, on the same date several of the contested transfers occurred. It directly relates to intent. The judge nodded. You may play it. The courtroom went silent except for the faint static as the recording started. At first, just shuffling papers, chairs moving. Then a familiar voice. Kody's. If we move the funds now, they won't notice. We'll just call it an operational adjustment. A man's voice responded, muffled. But it's supposed to be signed off by Janelle or Christine. They don't need to know. It'll just confuse them. They'll find out when it's time to pay taxes, and by then it'll be too late. Gasps filled the air. The judge raised his hand for order, but even he looked shaken. The audio continued. Look, Robyn and I are building something sustainable. The others, they're emotional. They'll spend it. I'm protecting what's left of the family's future. And then, almost like a whisper, the line that made the entire courtroom freeze, they can call it stealing if they want. I call it leadership. The recording stopped. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Janelle closed her eyes. Meri looked down, whispering something under her breath that the microphones didn't catch. Robyn's face turned pale. Kody broke the silence first. That's taken out of context, he snapped, standing halfway up. That wasn't even, the judge cut him off sharply. Mr. Brown, sit down. But Kody kept talking, his voice rising. You think that proves anything? I was protecting my family. That's what a man does. Janelle's lawyer turned toward him calmly. You were protecting your family, Mr. Brown. Not the family. Her tone was surgical. Every syllable hit with precision. Kody's lawyer tried to intervene, placing a hand on his arm, but it was too late. The courtroom had already made up its mind. The judge sighed. The recording will remain in evidence. We'll resume after a 15-minute recess. As the gavel struck, Kody muttered something that wasn't picked up by the mics but made Robyn flinch. She whispered, "Stop," her voice shaking, but he didn't. When they exited the courtroom, the hallway exploded with flashes and shouts. Reporters yelled questions, fans held signs, one even screamed, "You called it leadership?" Inside the defense's conference room, Kody paced like a caged animal. "This is all edited," he said. "They're twisting everything." Croft, his lawyer, rubbed his temples. "It's your voice, Kody." "So what?" "I can explain that," Kody snapped. "They'll believe me. They always have." But Croft didn't look convinced. He glanced toward Robyn, who sat in the corner, silent, staring at her hands. "They won't this time," he said quietly. That was the first time anyone had ever told Kody Brown that the story wasn't his anymore. Meanwhile, down the hall, Janelle and Meri sat side by side, away from the cameras. They didn't say much, just sat in the quiet, letting the weight of what had just happened settle between them. Finally, Meri broke the silence. "He really thought that was leadership," she said softly. Janelle nodded. "No," she said. "He thought control was love. They're not the same." That night, every major network ran the same headline: "Audio exposes Kody Brown's secret transfers, they'll never know." But this story wasn't just about what Kody had done, it was about what came next. Because when court resumed the next day, the defense made one last desperate attempt to turn the tide. And in doing so, they accidentally revealed something even worse. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with a kind of quiet electricity. Everyone knew what was coming. The evidence was devastating. The witnesses had spoken, and now only one thing remained: the defense's final cross-examination. Inside, the tension was sharp enough to cut. Kody sat stiffly beside his lawyer, his jaw clenched. Robyn avoided eye contact, her face pale under the bright courtroom lights. When the judge entered, the chatter died instantly. "We'll proceed," he said. "Mr. Croft, your witness." Croft rose, buttoning his jacket. "The defense calls Janelle Brown." The room stirred, people weren't expecting that. But Croft had one last card to play. His plan was clear: twist the emotional core of Janelle's testimony, make it look like a family feud instead of fraud. Janelle walked calmly to the stand. Her face was composed, her tone even. Croft began softly. "Mrs. Brown, you've said that Mr. Brown deceived you. That he misled you financially. But isn't it true that you voluntarily gave him control of the family accounts?" "Yes," Janelle said. "Because that's what we agreed to as a family. Trust was part of it." Croft nodded slowly. "Trust. And did he ever promise you personal ownership of those funds?" "No. He promised us honesty." A small murmur moved through the gallery. Croft adjusted his notes, searching for footing. "But you continued to work with him for years, even after disagreements?" Janelle smiled faintly. "That's what women in that family do, Mr. Croft. We keep showing up until the truth leaves us no choice but to stop." Croft hesitated. "And you're sure this isn't about anger? About jealousy?" Her reply was instant. "It's about accountability." You could hear someone exhale in the back row. Even the court reporter paused before resuming. Croft changed tactics. "Let's talk about this recording. You never actually heard Mr. Brown say he stole money, correct?" "No," Janelle said. "He said he moved it without telling us, and that we wouldn't notice." "That's not leadership, that's concealment." Croft's voice tightened. "Objection, Your Honor, speculation." The judge waved it off. "Overruled. The witness may continue." Janelle leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm but cold. "I'm not speculating. I lived it." That line landed like a gavel. Across the room, Kody whispered something to Croft, who ignored him. You could see the panic beginning to surface, the bouncing knee, the clenched fists. Croft pressed one last time. "Mrs. Brown, Would you agree that this case has caused you emotional pain? Yes. And that Mr. Brown has suffered as well? Janelle looked directly at Kody. The difference is, mine comes from betrayal. His comes from exposure. For a moment, no one moved. Then the judge said quietly, "That will be all." As Janelle stepped down, Kody slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're saints," he shouted. "You used me. Every single one of you." The judge's gavel hit hard. "Mr. Brown, that's enough." But Kody kept going, his voice cracking with desperation. "I carried all of you. You'd have nothing without me." The bailiff took a step forward. Robyn whispered, "Please, Kody, stop." He didn't. "You want to make me the villain? Fine. But you'll see what happens when the cameras stop rolling." "Mr. Brown," the judge said firmly, "sit down or you will be removed from this courtroom." For a long moment, he just stood there, chest heaving, face red, eyes darting around the room as if looking for an ally that no longer existed. Then, finally, he sat. The damage was done. When the jury returned from break, their faces said everything. The performance hadn't saved him, it had sealed his fate. Before closing arguments began, Kody leaned toward his lawyer and whispered, "We can fix this, right?" Croft didn't answer. In the back row, Meri and Janelle sat side by side, watching quietly. No victory smiles, no satisfaction. Just the stillness that comes when the truth has finally run its course. What happened next wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, procedural, the slow unfolding of justice. Because after years of manipulation, the women who once followed his lead were now walking him to his reckoning. And in the next part, that reckoning arrives, the verdict, the fallout, and the aftermath that would end the era of the Browns forever. The jury room lights stayed on for just under 4 hours. Long enough to deliberate, not long enough to debate. Everyone waiting outside knew that kind of speed meant only one thing, a clear decision. When the bailiff announced the jury was ready, the reporters rushed back in. The air was heavy with flashbulbs and whispers. Kody stared straight ahead, his leg bouncing under the table. Robyn sat rigid beside him, lips pressed into a trembling line. Across the aisle, Janelle exhaled deeply. Meri closed her eyes. "All rise," the bailiff said. The jury filed in, led by the forewoman, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and an expression that said she'd already seen enough. She handed the paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge read silently for a few moments. The sound of his glasses shifting against the microphone was the only noise in the room. Then he spoke. "In the matter of Brown v. Brown, we, the jury, find as follows." He paused. The entire room leaned forward. "On the count of breach of fiduciary duty, we find in favor of the plaintiffs." A ripple went through the gallery, a collective gasp, then silence. "On the count of financial misrepresentation and fraud, we find in favor of the plaintiffs." Robyn's hand shot to her mouth. Kody's jaw tightened. "And on the count of emotional distress and manipulation, we find in favor of the plaintiffs." Janelle closed her eyes. Meri gripped her hand beneath the table. The verdict was total. Complete. The judge continued, his tone formal but unmistakably solemn. "Damages will be awarded in the amount of $4.2 million in restitution, plus additional penalties for undisclosed accounts as determined by audit. Further, the court orders liquidation of the Coyote Pass assets to fulfill judgment." The gavel came down once. "Court so orders." For a few seconds, there was nothing, no movement, no noise, just the echo of that final strike. Then the room exploded. Reporters whispered into phones, photographers rushed the aisle. Robyn broke first, tears streaming down her face. Kody turned to her, eyes wild. "This is rigged," he hissed. "They've all been against us from the start." The judge called for order, but he kept talking. "You all think you're better than me? You needed me. Every one of you needed me." Security stepped closer. Meri stood, calm and composed. She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. "We needed you to be honest," she said softly. "That's all." Kody froze. The bailiff moved in. "Sir, you'll need to calm down." Kody stared at her for a long moment, his expression shifting, anger, confusion, denial, before finally collapsing back into his seat, deflated. The judge dismissed the court. Janelle and Meri walked out together, shoulder to shoulder. They didn't smile. They didn't gloat. They just walked, two women finally stepping out of someone else's shadow. Outside, the crowd was massive. Fans, cameras, former crew members, even a few familiar faces from the show's past. The chant started before the women even reached the courthouse steps. Justice for Janelle. Meri, we love you. A reporter shouted, what happens now? Janelle paused for a moment. We rebuild, she said simply. Meri nodded. But this time, on truth. Behind them, Kody and Robyn slipped out a side door into a waiting car. The windows were tinted, but one flash caught their faces just long enough to show the look everyone would remember, disbelief. That night, the headlines were everywhere. Janelle and Meri win landmark case, Kody found liable. The Browns' legacy ends in courtroom drama. Sister wives, the truth finally comes out. But what the cameras didn't catch, what the network would never show, was the quiet moment after, when Janelle and Meri sat in the back of a small SUV, driving away from the courthouse, neither speaking. After years of reality TV chaos, this silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. It was freedom. Meri finally broke the quiet. Do you think he'll ever understand? Janelle looked out the window, watching the courthouse fade behind them. He doesn't need to, she said. We do. They drove off into the Arizona sunset, leaving behind the echoes of everything they had survived. But this wasn't the end, not yet. Because just when it seemed the story was over, an envelope arrived on Janelle's doorstep 3 weeks later. No return address. Just one line scrawled across the front in familiar handwriting, you got your justice. Now here's the truth. Inside, a single USB drive. And that, insiders say, would lead to the next chapter, the one TLC never dared to show. 3 weeks after the verdict, the Arizona desert had gone quiet. The courthouse was empty, the cameras gone, and for the first time in years, the Brown family name had vanished from headlines. But inside Janelle's Flagstaff home, that quiet didn't last long. The envelope sat on her kitchen table, plain, white, and unmarked except for that single handwritten line, you got your justice. Now here's the truth. She turned it over in her hands for nearly an hour before opening it. Inside was a USB drive, nothing else. No note. No signature. Just silence. Meri arrived a few minutes later. They hadn't spoken much since the verdict, not because of tension, but because peace still felt strange. Janelle handed her the drive wordlessly. Another secret? Meri asked. Maybe the last one, Janelle said. They plugged it into Janelle's laptop. The file inside was titled private_recordings_2021. When it began to play, there was no video, just audio. At first, static, then a voice. Robyn's. You can't keep moving the money around, Kody. Someone's going to notice. Kody's voice followed, calm but cold. They already think I'm the villain. What difference does it make? They'll never believe anyone but me. But what about Meri? Meri's loyal. She'll defend me till the end. And Janelle? She's practical. She'll fight a little, but she doesn't have the stomach for a war. The recording continued, laughter, casual, unsettling. You think TLC will care? Robyn asked. TLC loves the drama. As long as the cameras keep rolling, they'll protect me. Meri looked away from the screen. So he knew, she whispered. He knew all of it. But the next line hit even harder. If it ever comes out, Kody said, I'll spin it. I'll say they turned on me. That they wanted revenge. People love a redemption story. The words echoed in the small kitchen. Janelle leaned back in her chair. He was already planning his comeback. They sat in silence as the recording played on hour after hour of conversations, laughter, plans, manipulation. It wasn't just proof of guilt. It was a map of his mind. When the last file ended, Janelle closed the laptop slowly. We can't release this, Meri said quietly. It's too much. Janelle nodded. No. But we can make sure it's never buried again. Later that week, the recordings were anonymously delivered to TLC's legal department. Within days, internal emails began to leak, the network discussing crisis management, narrative recovery, and long-term brand risk. For years, TLC had called the show reality. Now, even they couldn't hide how much of it was performance. And then, just like that, it was over. TLC issued a short statement: "We have no current plans to continue production on Sister Wives. We wish the Brown family peace and privacy moving forward." It was the most corporate way to describe the implosion of an empire. Meri moved to Utah soon after, quietly opening a small retreat center she'd always dreamed of starting. Janelle began consulting with women on financial independence, helping others avoid the same traps she'd once fallen into. As for Kody and Robyn, they disappeared from public life, their mansion quietly listed for sale. In one of the final messages Janelle ever sent to Meri, she wrote, "We didn't just win a case. We ended a chapter. Maybe even the book." And Meri's reply was simple: "Then let's write the next one ourselves." Months later, a fan spotted Janelle at a small community event in Arizona. No cameras, no entourage, just her and a smile that looked real for the first time in years. When asked if she missed being on TV, she laughed and said, "No. I'm finally living the part they never let me play, myself." That's the truth TLC never aired. The truth no one scripted. The women who were told they couldn't survive without him built something stronger than the family he tried to control. They built peace. And as the desert sun set over Coyote Pass for the last time, you could almost hear the echo of Meri's final words, the ones that closed her statement, and, in many ways, their story: "We were never broken. We were just waiting for the silence to end." Fade out.